2 days, rather, 8 hours and 36 minutes into the Trump shutdown. And as you mentioned, the approval, one of the tweets said the approval rating. NBC News reported over the weekend, NBC Wall Street Journal, Donald Trump at 39% approval. ABC News last night, ABC said their latest poll shows him at 36% approval. And that's even before the shutdown. So, Joe, the front page of the New York Times, or Washington Post, you brought it in this morning. America's, their headline, America First approach leaves the U.S. isolated. What is the impact? I mean, so how does the rest of the world see year one Donald Trump?
This is one of the most important and least discussed aspects of this disaster of a presidency. What he's doing to America abroad. Basically, he is presiding over the retreat of America in the world. He's presiding over the collapse of American influence in the world. We used to go out and advocate for democracy and human rights and international development. None of that is happening now. The first question diplomats would ask, officials would ask in foreign capitals is, what does Washington think? You don't hear that anymore. After this year of experience that's happened, meeting after meeting happen around the world, international meetings. The Post talks about the World Trade Organization meeting in South America, where the American representative gets up and gives a bellicose Donald Trump-like speech about unfair trade practices or about how our allies are taking advantage of it. And the U.S. is left isolated at the meeting. So what this means is that the U.S. is leaving a vacuum of leadership in the world that others are moving in to fill, specifically China. And that's what's happening all around the world today, is you're seeing the U.S. allowing China. It's not that China's got a particularly aggressive international policy here. In some areas like the South China Sea, yes.
Right.
But mostly, no. They're moving in to the vacuum that Donald Trump has left.
I guess one big example of this, right, the Paris Accords.
Yes.
Where we are now the only nation on the planet.
The only nation. Syria has just joined in the last few months. We're the only nation. And so the other nations are going ahead and making the rules and drawing the map without us. Same on trade. You know, you don't like the TPP. There was flaws with that. I'm sure you felt the same way. But then what are you going to replace it with? Well, the answer for Donald Trump is nothing. So what happened is China moves in, and they're writing the rules now on what Pacific trade, perhaps the most important area of the world in trade for us in the future, is going to be.
And again, that means the leader of for trade in Asia is China.
Absolutely.
In the Pacific.
Absolutely.
China.
And this is true, of course, for Europe as well. Europe's going through its own convulsions, has its own right-wing problems. I just met with some European leaders a week and a half ago who were in town to talk to Congress about the Iran deal. And they were absolutely clear that if America deserts the Iran deal, they will forge a path without us. They're not going to wait around to see what Trump thinks. They know what Trump thinks, and they're not impressed. So they're going out, and you can see the Europeans forging their own way, as German leader Merkel said. We have to take our own destiny in our own hands.
And we remember early in the Trump administration, he became the first modern president, certainly, to question NATO. Now, he kind of, sort of came around, but remember one time?
No, I wouldn't say. I mean, yes, kind of, sort of came around, but he basically sees NATO. He sees Europe and our NATO allies as economic rivals. So the whole world he sees in these New Jersey developer terms. These are my enemies. You know, these aren't my. Sure, that we belong to the same country club, but I'm in competition with them. So this is, and people have said this. This is the first president of the United States since the end of World War II who hasn't seen himself as the leader of the free world. That is not the way Trump looks at the world or looks at his own role.
So when people hear him say America first, well, first of all, there are echoes, I think we've talked about this, of pre-World War II, the
Charles Lindbergh.
Charles Lindbergh
Yeah,
and
America
others,
First,
right?
meaning
Joe Kennedy and others,
pro-Nazi
meaning
isolationists, stay out of World War II, leave that to the Germans.
right.
Right.
And that's what they called themselves,
The
America
Yeah,
First.
Yeah.
But when people around the world hear Donald Trump say America First today, you know, what do they think? It's sort of like, you know, we're all for ourselves and screw the rest of you, right?
That's exactly what they think. And you were just talking about the domestic polls. The international polls are the same way. You know, do you support American leadership in the world is the kind of question you would ask. Pew does these polls. 60% under Obama. Obama himself had very high ratings, but America overall about 60%. Trump in 1 year, God love him, has cut that in half. We're down to about 33%. A third of the world approves of our leadership. And remember, most of the world is constructed of our friends. You know, people who we give aid to, who have been part of security alliances and part of partnerships. Really, except for Israel, it's hard to think of any nation in the world. Pence is in Israel today. It's hard to think of any nation in the world that approves of what they see, that is looking to the U.S. for leadership on issues.